So, no quarter. We're gonna keep going. Who would like to kick off the discussion with questions for the papers or any kind of point? Oh, sorry. Alberto, please.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question for. I would love to have more questions. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend to the morning section because it was night over here. I tried my best, but I couldn't succeed. So I please like my colleagues that they talk in the morning. If there was something that was related to what I said or whatever, I might have some questions. But please, like, of course, go ahead and tell and let me know. For now, of course, I'm fresh from the presentation from Maria Laura and the Professor Azenia, right? And
Yes.
I was wondering because, of course, the beam is it's a very interesting system that it's growing and it's getting more settled. But I found, like, personally, even though I'm working with GIS and on my limits, of course, I found it still like a little bit like complicated for me as a system, as archaeologist, that of course I have to like use that system to do certain things for my research, for example. And I don't want to like enter in the questions like how if it exists something or it can be simplified or something. That's up to me. I should learn better, whatever. My question is if in like your development, so what you're doing, because I've seen you are doing very advanced like research on the beam, if there is because the the beam itself, it still involves like different platforms, like different software, different languages. So is there any like platform now like that like it can be used as an interoperability platform, so that so for people that they are not expert, like for example they don't know how to run an algorithm, but they have a research question. For example, they want to do like they want to filter or do some analysis on a model, and they can access a versions that is more like for users or for people that can interact with the with you like as developers and do works. That's I'm asking, and I'm sorry if it sounds stupid. It's just I don't know.
No, it's not stupid at all. Maybe I start and Maria Laura, you provide some additional commentary. So it's really pertinent because the world of BIM is full of jargon and very specific modeling techniques and very specific rules of playing the game that even the people in construction are fighting with the problem you just mentioned, that everything is too complicated and nobody is able to do it. And the question you asked me could be asked by a subcontractor. So someone is building this major building, and then there's this smaller contractor, a small company that is hired just to paint the walls. And this smaller company will have to interact with the BIM model, but they don't have knowledge or capacity to interoperate with this very strange new technology. So how is this being solved? It's being solved by making the technology available in smaller packages. So if you don't really need to understand the entire model, you only receive a part of it. So if you only need to paint the building, you will receive only the architectural part. You will not receive the plumbing, for example. So first, you only get a part of it. This is point number one. Second, you will get it in this interoperable format, which is IFC. So the person doing the BIM model was working in a very specific software, very specialized, very expensive. And when they finish their work, they will export this to this universal format, which can be used in thousand softwares, because the IFC can be read in any viewer, and most of them are free. Okay, so what happens is that in this example I was giving you, but I think it translates to your case as well, this subcontractor that is actually not expert in BIM at all is given this file and this app. He can use his mobile phone, or he can actually use a tablet or something. We have many cases of people using tablets, and then you will open the model and it's just like a game. So you actually rotate, you turn things on and off, and you understand what you're supposed to do, because then if you know a little bit more, then you can right click on a wall and understand what is the name of the paint you should put there and stuff like that. And if you use a slightly more advanced application, you can actually report to the main contractor, I finished painting this, okay? But all of this that I said, these are processes that are not yet done and not yet mature in the entire industry. We are fighting as researchers also to democratize access to this in a way that everyone can use BIM without necessarily being an expert. But if you want to be an expert, yeah, there's a lot of things to explore, particularly the research that Maria Laura was saying about ontologies and semantic web, where we try to bring meaning into the concepts and taxonomies of everything that we are putting, so that we assist the AI of the future to leverage on data that starts to be structured in a common manner. Okay, but yeah, that's my part of the answer, but Maria Laura will probably complement that. And
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, what
Thank you.
thank you for the question. Yes, as Miguel was saying, was very pertinent, because imagine that we have even like master course or a lot of classes even for people that just graduate or they come from industry, and even for them is really hard, because it's a new world and a new way of designing and to store data that is completely different. What we can say is that from our side, we are trying to develop these tools in such a way that those are the most user-friendly possible, like adding new documentation, being, let's say, very specific to some use, so that the people do not have the need of knowing what's behind. For example, for using this interoperability tool that we developed, there is like a documentation that we created, and nobody needs to really know what is happening under the scene, like with the codes, no, because otherwise is impossible. So yes, we're trying to move towards this direction, but of course we are fighting some complexities, but we will get there.
Yeah, thanks. Because of course it's very attractive. Like it sounds like, the BIM so far. It sounds like the solution that a lot of people is waiting for, managing everything at the same time. I know there's a lot of complication to solve yet, but I mean it sounds very promising. And of course, I'm also exploring a little bit and how to, in our fields, like most for a completely different context, as you said, because we're working with structures that are not real structures, but of course, like I'm waiting for step forward, because
Oh, I forgot to suggest. I suggest to go towards the use of Blender BIM.
Yeah.
Because you can model in Blender, and in Blender you can also import easily point cloud and those things. And the use of Blender BIM, since is a tool that is based on IFC and not other format, would also allow you to understand better the IFC structure. So if someone wants to go in this direction, I really suggest Blender BIM.
I was thinking the same. So first of all, hello to Miguel and Maria Laura, and thank you very much for accepting to participate in this meeting. Thank you, Alberto, also. And I was thinking the same, because Blender has this extension that you related to the BIM and is a way to expand the BIM format also in other platform and workflows.
Is that mostly used for going from Blender to BIM or from BIM to?
Both, but correct me if I'm wrong, but we use BIM in our workflow within the BiGAr project, just to check the consistency of the meshes or other volumes we produce it, but also to export IFC format, so transform the OBJ into IFC and vice versa.
And that, just to be clear, that would be a solid, like you could, that would be give you the ability to transform a solid, like a voxel solid into a mesh, like an OBJ mesh.
Mhm.
So I have a question for Maria Laura and Miguel. So you explained it, so you presented this case study that is related to the analysis of historical buildings and so on. So I was curious because did you, and I had this question because, so did you ever consider to take into account also to model your building in stratigraphic units as it happened in archaeology? So to consider smaller part of the wall and so on, and just to specify also the ontology of this single part. So there's a second related question that is, what is your minimal unit inside the model?
Yes, I would love to, for example, I really understand the question in the sense that imagine the structure that we model most of the time, you know, you have like a first stage, then someone builds something on the top, then someone else adds some parts. And yes, it would be nice to model these stages and to understand how the structure reacted when they add new parts. So this would be like super interesting for us. And yes, it's one of our next, like in my dreams, is one of our next stage. And about like the minimal units, so far we are considering, let's say the minimal units of our models is these finite elements that are like this solid mesh that represents an homogenized portion of masonry. So far we are not modeling, for instance, stone by stone. Yeah. And why? It's not so much as people could think because of, let's say, computational problems. Because nowadays we are trying to face computational problems by parallelizing our code, and that more fast analysis. The problem is that we do not have information on how walls are. So we have just some ideas, and what we can do is like, even with the ontology that we were proposing, try to understand which are more or less, based on literature, our mechanical properties. But we would love, and this is one of our next steps, to try to understand how is the wall inside and really model rocks by rocks. There are now algorithms that study, because we cannot access, because we in order to access, we should break the wall, like it's impossible. But there are now algorithms that are very interesting, because you need to define some specific type of masonry, and they try to reconstruct based on statistics and things like that, how the walls should be done inside. And this has been done in a PFL, if I don't mistake. But these algorithms still are not so stable. So sometimes they don't work. They work just with some specific type of masonry. So the dream is really this, like going stone by stone. Computational resources we have is difficult because we don't have data and we don't know how to break our wall. That's the problem.
Well, there's also another aspect probably related to this one, that is also the problem of relationship between the different parts. So, for example, taking into account how the different parts are related to each other. So, for example, what lives on another wall or is covered or not. So, what in archaeology we define the stratigraphic relationship. So, they may influence also the behavior of the wall when it's like stimulated by external.
Especially in connection, for instance, between the masonry part and the timber part, the way things are connected, when a certain roof was inserted, it changed a lot. So in structural analysis so far, most of the time they do simplification because like, so it's somehow recent, the structural analysis of historical construction. We are not used to model those things, but yes, it's very important, and I hope that we get there with the help of BIM.
Thank you.
Yes, if I may add just one thing that was related even to the first comment that Marco you made is our fundamental unit in BIM is a complicated thing to define because IFC, the universal format for BIM, is actually specialized in certain type of elements. So IFC will know that if you want to model a door, the door has to have some characteristics, and this is predefined, okay? So the same will happen for a window, the same will happen for a wall, but this happens for new construction. For historical construction, the make of the walls is very specific. As Maria Laura was saying, it can go stone by stone if you want. And IFC is not prepared for this in the first place. So it was not made for that, okay? Let me give you another example that may relate to you. IFC was not made to make concrete bridges or to make highways or to make railways in the beginning. So the latest version of IFC, which is IFC 4.3, that was out a month ago. I mean, not out a month ago. It was approved internationally in the ISO standard a month ago. And now it can handle railways, it can handle bridges and reinforced special highways, okay? So the IFC was upgraded with the capacity to model certain specialized objects that were not there in the first place, even geotechnical stratum, okay? So this was something that was not there, and now it's there. So it's got specialized elements with capacity to represent the geometry of those things and capacity to represent the non-geometrical information that is important for those things. So if I can dream, like Maria Laura was saying before, my dream is that at some point there will be a joint venture between the construction industry and archaeology, and we figure out, okay, archaeology will also be able to represent the stratigraphy or whatever, I'm sorry for my stupid terminology, whatever you need to represent with meshes and stuff like that, and with uncertainties, you will agree on the way to represent it in a neutral format, and you can upgrade the IFC because the IFC is ever upgradable. So I dream of a world where there will be a connection of some committee of archaeologists internationally and Building Smart, and probably we can bring everything to be represented in the same way. Just to finish my intervention, this happened in construction because the IFC format was not created by construction. It was created by the industry of aeronautics and mechanics, and they were exchanging information between each other. Then the construction created specialized elements for construction. And if we have the specialized elements for archaeology, yeah, perfect world. Just to provide some positive message, I think it will be possible. Yeah.
That was also my dream. It's still my dream. And yeah, that was the same problem we had when we discussed about the problem of representing the archaeological layer, and so all the galaxy of non-parametric object. Yeah. Thank you. And well, I don't know if someone else has a question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I confess I'm quite ignorant about the BIM work. So I was wondering, is there any plan? What's the current situation about integration of 3D models in a BIM environment? and the handling of geospatial information, whereas for geospatial information, I mean information related to the landscape in order to have connection between the single monument, the single building, and the surrounding landscape. And by that, I mean also what is the possibility for BIM, if there is a possibility or if there is a plan for the future to handle, let's say, single monuments and digital terrain models, and even more web-based layer related to satellite imagery of the landscape, different layers, OpenStreetMap layers, something like that. So, yeah.
So may I take this, Maria Laura? Yeah.
Yes, yes,
And then
please.
you complement me. So also very pertinent, also an aspect that has been addressed by particularly the community of urbanism in BIM, because there's as I said, we are in the digital building permits process, and in there it's very important because the municipalities will have the geographical information systems where all the urban planning zones are, and BIM will have the details of the buildings that are already built or the buildings we want to build. And these are two things that happen at different scales. So the scale of the urban landscape is very big. The scale of the BIM model is relatively small by comparison. Fortunately, this is already in ISO standards, how BIM and GIS can interoperate. So the open formats of BIM, of GIS managed by the Open Geospatial Consortium, OGC, and the open standards of BIM managed by Building Smart, there have been already several joint ventures in which it becomes relatively easy to join the two scales of models in a single one. So, of course, when I say relatively easy, I mean if you want to blend one BIM model into the GIS space, because the BIM model will be georeferenced, and the georeferencing is coherent with the georeferencing of the urban model, and they will blend perfectly. What is the problem? The problem is that you cannot dream of putting all the buildings of a city inside GIS, because it makes no sense, because if you put all the buildings with all the doors, all the windows, all the details of all the layers, then you will have terabytes model, and you cannot see it in a reasonable way. So the way we are going nowadays is that urban planners are working with the GIS models where they will have the buildings, which are a simplified version of the BIM model. And this is one thing that is happening a lot. Sorry if I'm insulting archaeologists, because I have no idea of how things go for you guys, but for us and for architects in general, it's okay that the building is converted, which is a BIM model that maybe has 300 megabytes, it will convert it only to the outer shell with the balconies, with the windows, but only the outer shell, and it will be exported to GIS, and it's stored as GIS in the geographical information system. So then you can look at the urban planning and look at the big picture rather than the details of the inside, and all the urban planning model for GIS will contain the information that is relevant for that context. If you need more information, we'll just say, I want to see the BIM model that was supposed to be here, and the platform will give you. This allows that you can manage things in web platforms, and municipalities are working a lot in that. Web platforms that are capable of showing the entire city at once, and you zoom in, and then you may want to see the BIM model in that particular place, and this is also technically possible. This is how it's solved for us, okay? Maybe it doesn't work for you guys, but this has been solved. Maria Laura, I don't know, probably you have something else to say. Thank you.
I think you covered pretty much everything. Yes, is what we're trying to do in the platform, basically, that we have this very simplified part in the context. But of course, like if you have a very detailed model and you want to add some context, you can do, but it's always like trying to balance like a very heavy model with the type of information that you need.
Yeah, but I think this is, this is a good point. I mean, it depends very much on the research priorities that someone has. There are different communities, architecture communities, urban planning communities, and archaeologist communities. And of course, I think the good aspect is that we are all moving in the direction where we try to integrate more and more single building, single object data set to the landscape data set, geospatial information, because this is becoming a relevant aspect to address. I mean, the scalability of the information that we have.
Yes, and also going with link data, somehow you can connect a little bit different type of data as you were mentioning, like different layer of cartography, and you can like see a little bit what are the relationship between these different way of storing the data. They are trying to go also in that direction.
I asked that question, sorry to keep this discussion open, but because I'm thinking, for example, on viewshed analysis, that is a hot topic in archaeology for a long time. There's been a lot of papers and articles published on this theme, and viewshed analysis has always been treated as a 2.5D problem rather than a full three-dimensional problem.
Mm-hmm.
But by having a data set, full 3D models, full 3D data incorporated in a landscape, in a digital terrain model, in an environment where you can manage both of the type of information, it is possible to mark and advance also in viewshed analysis. And viewshed analysis is used also for planning. So we have an example. But of course, you don't need to have a super detailed representation of a single image if you want to perform it on the landscape level. So again, it depends on what's that.
Well, I have a question for Christian that I did not have the time to ask before. So you mentioned in the morning session that you underscore the problem that is related to the distance between the archaeologist and the interpretation phase of the archaeological evidence. What do you suggest to solve this problem?
Well, first of all, I think that now with the new technologies and including also BIM, and this is what Giacomo presented today. We really have new formats where our data can be adapted. Talking about what we have now, if you remember, I say that I would dream to learn how to use real 3D data, but for now I'm happy to use in a smart way 2.5 or 2D data of GIS, viewshed analysis, and so on. So the idea is that we really need, and so once again, the problem is the standards. So we really need to convey as soon as possible in a reliable format informations about the stratigraphy, but I don't have a solution. Well, I don't have a solution. I don't have the 100% solution because of course we miss everything about the topology. We miss everything about the stratigraphic relationships. That's why every one of us would love to use BIM for archaeology. So the solution is trying to As I told you, I don't know. I'm also thinking about what Nicola presented. So instead of joining together the small pieces of plans, maybe we can join together on a 3D, of course, on a digital 3D space, the different models. We can cut these models, and maybe we can let's say have a blind geometry that can carry all the information. I mean, a blind geometry. We can have a 3D layer that, of course, is not the stratigraphic unit. We can have the perimeter, the 3D perimeter of the stratigraphic unit that can be transparent in a let's say in arc scene, and have inside that shape file, that geo package, we can have those information, but it of course it will not be the solution, because I totally agree with Giacomo. We cannot think about bringing on the old way to document our stratigraphy. We cannot be happy with this kind of representation, and then, oh, I need to check the stratigraphic relationship. So let me see my database, or let me see my Harris matrix. That's the old way. So for the moment, I think that one solution can be, as soon as possible, transform, and this is again what Nicolas said at the beginning of the afternoon, is immediately with it's Gabi workflow, but I'm sure it's also your excavation workflow. It's the workflow that the small community Andrea was talking about this morning is using, but we need to, at least we need to do it. We need to teach students that you cannot be happy just with an orthophoto model. You cannot be happy with point clouds, and we must be at least happy to reach this stage, that is just a stage that is waiting for the next step. I remember before you went to lunch, Enrico was saying we are already preparing the next generation. We are already post-digital, and so I think that we must think about a moment, maybe years, I hope, when we will have the chance to do more. But for the moment, I think that we must learn how to manage our 2.5D geometries in 3D environments, as the Lunte-Landeschi showed us in the manual. So I'm pretty happy with this solution, and I think that every one of you agrees that it's not the solution, but it's the best that we can do now. I don't know if you agree with me.
If I can add a comment to this, because I think this is a very relevant point of discussion. I mean, no matter if you are doing a 3D, 2.5D, 2D documentation, I think it's important at least to reflect on the distinction between what is the acquired data and what is the interpreted data, because there must be separation, and there must be an awareness about these two different levels. Because one thing is the orthophoto map, the point cloud, as we're saying. Another thing is the interpretive drawing. So the drawing, no matter which kind of drawing you're doing, it's a three-dimensional drawing, it's a traditional bi-dimensional drawing. And it's an exercise, it's an hermeneutic exercise that allow the archaeologists to think about certain what has been observed in the field and what has been interpreted in the field. And it's an exercise that involves usually different actors. So it's not just the official drawer, it's the archaeologists, the team of archaeologists who are in charge of the excavation, if we want to think about the cloud search approach. As it's been shown in the BiGAr project as well. So I think it's important to be very clear about what is the level of interpretation and the level of data acquisition. So two separate things.
Oh, and I think also in terms of what Marco was saying, that as a rule of thumb in any kind of data collection, the more you're making decisions, the more you are sort of explicitly bringing in a sort of bias and vice versa. So that's where I was coming from, saying that the more we are going along with a sort of generalized methodology like Barker-Harris and just sort of repeating it over and over and over, and the more there is this potentially this fake objectivity where we think, oh well, we've done Barker and Harris, and so we're good. This is a neutral observation. The more instead we start making all these decisions about resolution, scale, sort of intra-layer reporting to enhancers, which we need, all these decisions inevitably will have irregular repercussions, and I think that's the crucial part. And that's not a bad thing. That is, in fact, instead of the totality of perspective, that is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well, I know we are the last Iraq survivors of the long day of discussion about theory and digital technology, but I have just a question for Tyler. So is there a roadmap for the digital Gabi workflow platform publication to integrate the landscape inside the publication?
Yes, I think there is. So I don't have anything pulled up on the screen right now, but the last, so volume 1, we had a landscape model that was very rough around the edges. It was produced, I think, around 2014 or 2015, based on the available data that we had. Volume 2 had an updated terrain model that was developed around 2019. And in the meantime, several tools have come out, that provide access to better data and easier. So I think one thing in, the immediate future in our plans is to attempt a better model of the terrain surrounding Gabi. So that's one thing, is just the actual terrain model, right? The other part of it is the information attached to the terrain, right? Populating the terrain with information. So it's tough because when you put something in a 3D scene, people immediately want more, right? I mean, and I think it's one problem is that we're still often viewing 3D models in this kind of, abstract, weird space with nothing surrounding them, right? Or if something surrounds it, then it's like maybe a very, very schematic or abstract representation of what's nearby. So we're really not viewing models in context very often. Right, and we've gotten used to not viewing them in context. Just like when you view the limits of an SU, right, a single context drawing, it's some sort of white floating, nothingness, right? So you're really not looking at a representation as much as an abstraction of information, right? The second that you put in something like a terrain model and you see the hills in the distance, right? The user, the reader is immediately drawn to that and wants more information. So this is something that we, the first volume we produced, we did user testing, and it was consistent. The consistent feedback we got on, well, what's outside of the little trench? You gave us the trench and let us explore that, but what's beyond that? So the first thing we did was just put some basic information about the other areas of Gabi that are not included in volume 2, for example, where volume 2 was area A and B, and it's like, here's a blurb on area C and D and E. And yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty is really sketching, is drawing the limits and saying, where do we so you could put as much information as you want in such a model, right? You could really cram it with as much information as you want. The challenge is two things. First, interface design, which is a perennial problem for everything from any kind of WebGIS map. I'm sure BIM has similar issues as well. I'm not experienced with that technology, but I'm sure there's you run into that problem. You can cram in as much information as you want, but you have to provide an interface, a user interface that allows people to access that information in a meaningful way, right? So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is knowing where to draw the limit, right? But yeah, I think that's certainly, and the last thing I'll say too is one issue I did not discuss, but it has come up again and again with Gabi is, we have volume 1, volume 2, soon we'll have volume 3. How do these various volumes, how do we begin to think about integrating all of this data into a single environment, right? A very similar problem to what Miguel was just discussing with, how do you integrate your huge BIM model into a GIS environment, right? At some point, you run into a problem of having massive amounts of data, but you have to at least provide access, kind of contextual access to. So yeah, those are the issues.
Especially if people already produced and published a scene, it's particularly jarring that you don't see it in a later volume. And yet it isn't an obvious, it is not obvious how you do that without, loading the 3D model, which already takes a while to download with 3 times as much data. And then with the 4th volume, you just, not exponentially, but linearly, keep adding to the quantity of data that you have to download at each volume. And yes, technology will, make enlarge the bottlenecks a little bit, but not fast enough for this massive amount. So you've got to come up with some, because especially since in some cases we have different volumes overlapping in 2D.
Yeah.
So you have a volume that is cut for archaeological reasons and for reasons of, also of specific know-how of various editors. You may have, we do have volumes for the later part of the sequence of an area is in one volume, and the earlier part of the same area is in another volume. Now, these two scenes are not only juxtaposed, but they actually intermesh.
Yeah.
Because the pits of the later phase go into holes of the earlier phase. So in theory, we would want this complexity to be available.
Yeah.
But then if you try to do that, then you would have to bring in the whole existing model of the other scene, and so that is, and that's, as you guys know, that's one of the things that we are trying to look into it if we get the NIH grant. Then this is one of the things that we would want to explore.
Yeah, and all of this, just to underline for everyone, all of this is a problem of that emanates from the need to stream these things on the web.
Yes.
Right. Because I mean, obviously people are playing games with way more detail than we would ever dream of.
This would go on one fixed computer in a museum.
Yeah,
You could have as much data on it as you want.
exactly.
And you could have, instead of having ports, a couple buttons on.
You know, I think we can conclude this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We can just continue to discuss these topics in the break. We have just this break.
And Mark, you did a good job. And
Thank you.
Grazie Marco.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marco.
So
Thank
that's
you, everybody.
Right.
next day, BiGAr, thank you very much. And so bye-bye. Thank you for the moment.
Thank you. Thank you a lot
Thank
for
you,
inviting.
thank you all. Thank you, Marco.
Congratulations
Bye-bye.
on the event.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye
Pleasure.
bye.